Please close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the exact smell of the hot Cairo asphalt right after the neighborhood doorman splashed water on it in the early morning. Or perhaps recall the warm, comforting aroma of roasted cumin drifting from a wooden food cart. Welcome back, my dear friend. Today, we are going on a deeply personal journey to uncover 20 forgotten things and rituals from Egypt in the 1970s and 80s that we have slowly lost to time. These are not just objects. They are the beautiful, fragile fragments of our youth. And please, stay with me until the very end, because the 20th memory we will talk about holds a sweetness and a pure innocence that will absolutely bring a warm tear to your eye. Time used to flow completely differently back then, did it not? In those golden days, our days were not measured by the endless scrolling of screens or the frantic beeping of instant notifications. Time walked at a gentle, unhurried pace. We actually had to wait for things, and in that waiting there was a profound sense of anticipation and true joy. People today often look back and think that because we lacked modern technology, our lives were somehow poorer or less connected. But you and I know the absolute truth. The reality is that our lives were infinitely richer in genuine emotion, in deep human sincerity, and in physical presence. We looked into each other's eyes, not at glowing rectangles. We shared laughter across narrow balconies, and our homes were always open. Life was a beautifully woven tapestry of shared experiences, where every small detail meant something deeply profound. Now let us remember the magical woven basket, known to all of us as the sabbat. Imagine standing on your balcony on the third or fourth floor in the golden afternoon light. You held a thick, slightly frayed rope in your hands, tied securely to the handle of this simple basket. Inside the basket, you would place a few metal coins and a small, handwritten note for the local grocer down on the street. You would slowly lower it down, listening to the gentle squeak of the rope rubbing against the iron railing. Then, you would lean over the edge and call out the name of the grocer, your voice carrying through the neighborhood air. There was a profound, unspoken trust in this daily ritual. No one would ever dream of taking the money from the basket as it dangled just above the street. A few minutes later, you would pull the heavy rope back up, hand over hand, feeling the satisfying weight of your newly purchased goods. The basket would arrive at your balcony bearing treasures. Perhaps it held a stack of warm, freshly baked baladi bread, wrapped in old newspaper, or cold glass bottles of milk with cream settled at the top. The balcony was our absolute bridge to the outside world, and that simple woven basket was our daily connection to the community that surrounded us. It taught us patience, trust, and the beautiful rhythm of neighborhood life. Let us drift back to the first Thursday of every single month, a night when the bustling streets of Cairo, Alexandria, and every city in between would completely empty out. It was as if time itself held its breath. Every household, regardless of their social standing, gathered around a large wooden radio box. The warm yellow light from the dial softly illuminated the room as families sat together, sipping hot black tea heavily steeped with fresh mint leaves. The air was thick with pure anticipation until the crackling static gave way to the majestic voice of the announcer. And then, the music began. The legendary Kulthum would step up to the microphone, and her powerful, emotion-filled voice would wash over the entire nation. For hours upon hours, we would sit completely mesmerized. We felt every single word of love, longing, and heartbreak, as if she were singing directly to our own souls. Men would sigh deeply, women would close their eyes in absolute trance, and even the children knew better than to make a sound. It was not just a musical performance. It was a sacred, unified ritual that connected millions of hearts across the country under the spell of one magnificent woman. We did not need visual spectacles. The pure magic of the sound, echoing through the quiet streets, was enough to fill our spirits completely. And who could possibly forget the unique rhythmic sounds and smells of the local ironing shop? Let us think about the neighborhood ironing man, the makwagi, and his incredible physical craft. Before the era of lightweight electric steam irons, Ironing clothes was a true display of strength and skill. The shop was always intensely warm, filled with the comforting smell of slightly scorched cotton and hot, damp fabric. The man would heat a massive, incredibly heavy piece of solid cast iron over an open, roaring blue flame. When it was hot enough, he would take a mouthful of water and spray it out in a fine, miraculous mist directly onto our freshly washed trousers and shirts. Then, he would place the heavy iron on the clothes and actually use his bare foot to press it down, gliding it back and forth with a mesmerizing rhythmic motion. The sheer physical effort required to maneuver that heavy metal with his foot was astounding to watch as a child. He knew exactly how much pressure to apply so as not to ruin the delicate fabrics. Walking past his shop in the late afternoon, you would hear the sharp hiss of water turning into steam upon hitting the hot iron, followed by the heavy thump of the metal against the padded wooden table. It was an art form, a sensory experience that defined the atmosphere of our beloved streets. Now let us bring our memories back inside the home, straight into the heart of the kitchen, to remember the beloved kerosene stove. Some called it the cumin, others simply the Weber. It was a sturdy, shining brass cylinder that commanded absolute respect in the household. Using it was a deliberate, almost ceremonial process. You had to use a small metal pin to clean the nozzle, then pump the handle rhythmically to build up the necessary air pressure inside. The sound of that pumping, a steady squeak and swoosh, was the universal soundtrack of a typical Egyptian morning. When you finally lit the match, a fierce, roaring blue flame would burst to life, accompanied by a loud, continuous hissing noise. The distinctive, sharp smell of kerosene would quickly mix with the morning air, a scent that immediately signaled the start of a new day. On top of this powerful little stove, our mothers would place a heavy copper pot to slowly simmer fava beans for hours until they were perfectly tender. Or they would boil water in a small metal kettle to brew the strongest, darkest cup of tea you could ever imagine. The kerosene stove required constant attention, maintenance, and care. It was not instantaneous like turning a plastic knob today, but the warmth it provided and the delicious food it helped create made it the true, beating heart of our family homes. Do you remember the sheer magic of the holy month of Ramadan back in the 1970s and 80s? The absolute pinnacle of our evening was gathering around the small, bulky television set to watch the famous musical riddles, the Fawazir. After a long day of fasting, and after enjoying a heavy, delicious meal, the entire family would cram onto one single living room sofa. Sometimes, even the neighbors who did not own a television would come over and join us. We all stared with wide eyes at the glowing screen, waiting for the beautiful and incredibly talented Nelly to appear. Even though many of our televisions were only black and white, the dazzling costumes, the elaborate dances, and the catchy, upbeat melodies brought a spectacular explosion of color into our imaginations. We would listen intently to her playful, rhyming riddles, trying to guess the hidden answer before anyone else in the room. There was such a beautiful, profound innocence in those broadcasts. We did not have hundreds of channels or on-demand streaming to choose from. We had one shared experience, one beautiful show that gave us endless joy and something to excitedly discuss at school or work the very next morning. It was a time when entertainment brought us closer together physically, sitting shoulder to shoulder in the warm glow of the television tube. Let us take a slow morning walk down to the corner of our old street, right to where the wooden food cart stood waiting. The Arabiyat el-Ful was an absolute staple of our daily lives. Painted in bright, cheerful colors, with beautiful Arabic calligraphy on the sides, the cart was a beacon for hungry workers, hurried students, and neighborhood elders alike. In the very center of the cart sat the magnificent qadra, a massive teardrop-shaped copper pot that kept the slow-cooked fava beans perfectly hot and soft. The vendor was a master of his craft, moving with incredible speed. With a rhythmic clatter of metal spoons against ceramic plates, he would scoop out the steaming beans, vigorously mashing them before adding a generous splash of pungent, golden flaxseed oil. Then came the squeeze of fresh lemon, the heavy dash of earthy roasted cumin, and a sprinkle of salt. The aroma that surrounded that small wooden cart was incredibly intoxicating. It was the smell of hard work, of community, and of the most satisfying breakfast imaginable. We would stand right there on the sidewalk, tearing off pieces of warm, flat baladi bread to scoop up the delicious beans, chatting with neighbors and strangers alike. Everyone was equal standing around that cart, united by the simple, glorious taste of our national dish in the cool morning air. And then came the glorious summer months, which meant one very important thing for countless families: the annual trip to the coastal city of Alexandria. Preparing for the journey was an event in itself, packing large canvas bags and eagerly boarding the crowded, rhythmic trains heading north. The very moment you stepped out of the railway station, the cool, salty sea breeze, heavy with the sharp, clean scent of iodine, would instantly hit your face, washing away the heat and dust of the city. We would rent simple, modest wooden cabins near the shores of Sidi Bishr or Ma'mura. The beaches were an absolute sea of brightly colored, striped canvas umbrellas swaying slightly in the coastal wind. We spent our entire days running across the hot, golden sand, building castles and jumping into the crashing, salty waves. Do you remember the beautiful sound of the wandering vendors walking along the shoreline? They carried large, glass-fronted wooden boxes, calling out to sell the sweet, crispy fresco wafers filled with honey and nuts. As the sun began to set, painting the Mediterranean sky in stunning shades of purple and orange, families would stroll lazily along the corniche, eating roasted corn on the cob or enjoying a cold scoop of ice cream. Those Alexandrian summers felt completely endless, wrapped in a blanket of simple, carefree joy. Now let us remember the music of our youth, specifically the magic of the humble plastic cassette tape. Owning an original album by Abdel Halim Hafez or Warda was a true badge of honor. But for most of us, our music collections consisted of blank tapes that we used to painstakingly record our favorite songs directly from the radio broadcasts. You had to sit with your finger hovering anxiously over the heavy plastic record button, waiting for the exact moment the song began, praying that the radio announcer would not speak over the beautiful instrumental introduction. And when you wanted to listen to your absolute favorite track again, you did not simply press a digital back button. No, to save the precious battery life of your portable cassette player, you would remove the tape, insert a six-sided wooden pencil into one of the plastic reels, and manually spin the cassette round and round to rewind the brown magnetic ribbon. It was a deeply tactile, physical relationship with the music we loved. We knew every single click and hiss of those tapes. Sometimes the delicate ribbon would get tangled in the machine, and we would spend an hour carefully pulling it out and flattening it to save our precious recorded memories. Every song we listened to was truly earned through effort, patience, and a deep love for the art of music. Let us talk about a concept that is completely foreign to today's younger generations: the idea of a television network actually going to sleep. Back in the 1970s and 80s, we only had Channel 1 and Channel 2, and they did not broadcast 24 hours a day. In the early morning and throughout the middle of the day, the screen would only display a static, colorful test card, accompanied by a single, high-pitched, continuous tone. The true excitement began in the mid-afternoon. Children coming home from school would sit impatiently on the patterned living room rug, staring at that test card, waiting for the magical moment the broadcast would finally begin. Suddenly, the annoying tone would disappear, replaced by the calming, spiritual recitation of the Holy Quran, which officially opened the day's programming. This was immediately followed by the proud playing of the national anthem, and only then would the beloved afternoon cartoons finally start. This strict daily schedule taught us the profound value of delayed gratification. We could not watch whatever we wanted whenever we pleased. We had to wait for the world to turn, for the transmission to start, and that waiting made the colorful animated stories and the evening dramas infinitely more exciting and deeply appreciated. Do you remember the distinctive, slightly bitter smell of freshly printed ink on cheap, rough paper? That was the beautiful scent of Thursday mornings, the day when the new issues of Mickey and Samir comic magazines would finally hit the local neighborhood newspaper kiosks. As children, we would save our small metallic coins all week just for this specific moment. We would run down the dusty streets to the vendor, eagerly handing over our hard-earned pocket money in exchange for those thin, colorful paper magazines. What made these comics so incredibly special was how brilliantly they were localized. We were not just reading translated foreign stories. The characters felt like they actually lived among us in our own Egyptian streets. They celebrated our holidays, they ate our traditional foods, and they spoke in our familiar, comforting local slang. Escaping into those vibrant, beautifully drawn pages was the ultimate weekly treat. We would read them carefully, cover to cover, trading older issues with our friends and cousins so that we could consume every single story available. Holding those soft, fragile pages in our hands gave us a sense of pure, unadulterated joy that no digital tablet or brightly lit smartphone screen could ever possibly replicate for a child today. Let us take a moment to sit down at the traditional neighborhood coffee shop, the Awa, which was the beating social heart of every street. Picture the rows of worn wooden chairs with their tightly woven, slightly sagging straw seats, all arranged perfectly to face the bustling street like a theater audience watching the drama of daily life unfold. The absolute soundtrack of the Awa was the sharp, aggressive clack of small plastic backgammon dice hitting the hollow wooden playing boards, accompanied by the loud, joyous arguments of the men playing. Above this rhythmic noise, you could hear the continuous, deep bubbling of the glass shisha water pipes. The heavy, sweet aroma of apple-flavored tobacco would drift into the street, mingling with the powerful scent of strong, dark coffee being boiled slowly in tiny copper pots over a bed of incredibly hot sand. The Awa was not merely a place to consume a beverage. It was the supreme social network of our era. It was where the neighborhood men gathered to fiercely debate politics, loudly celebrate football victories, and quietly support each other through the profound struggles of life. Sitting there, sipping tea from a small, clear glass, you felt absolutely connected to the pulse of the community, grounded in a space where time seemed to comfortably stand still. Now let us recall a simple, sweet refreshment that defined our youth. Before the absolute dominance of cheap plastic bottles and aluminum cans, we had heavy, deeply textured, returnable glass soda bottles. The most iconic of them all was the beloved local brand featuring the famous, intricate B logo on the cap. Buying a bottle of cold, dark soda from the neighborhood grocer was a deeply sensory ritual. The grocer would use a heavy metal opener attached to the wooden counter to pop off the metal cap, releasing a sharp, satisfying hiss of pressurized air. You would tilt your head back and drink, feeling the intense, almost painful fizz burning the back of your throat in the absolute best way possible. The glass bottle itself felt substantial and incredibly cold in your hands on a sweltering summer day. But the most important part of this ritual was that you could not just throw the bottle away. You stood right there next to the wooden counter to finish your drink, or you paid a small coin as a deposit to take the bottle home, carefully returning it the very next day. The musical sound of empty glass bottles clinking together as the grocer placed them back into divided wooden crates is a beautiful acoustic memory that instantly transports us back to those simpler, more responsible days of our youth. We must also speak of the most sacred and cherished day of the entire week, the traditional Egyptian Friday. This day was never meant for running errands or frantic productivity. It was a holy day completely dedicated to faith, absolute rest, and profound family connection. The sensory experience of Friday began just before noon, when the spiritual, melodic sound of the Sheikh's sermon would echo from the loudspeakers of the local mosque, drifting warmly through the open windows of our apartments. Inside the home, our mothers would carefully light a piece of natural charcoal and place fragrant incense, the bokhur, on top. The thick, white, aromatic smoke would curl beautifully through the hallways, purifying the air and setting a deeply peaceful mood. After the men returned from the communal prayers, the entire extended family would gather around a large, beautifully set dining table. We eagerly awaited the magnificent feast. The unmistakable, mouth-watering aroma of rich, garlic-infused molokhia being poured over fluffy white rice, accompanied by perfectly roasted chicken, was the ultimate reward of the week. That Friday meal was where stories were shared, Laughter erupted, and the powerful, unbreakable bonds of our Egyptian families were beautifully nourished and lovingly maintained week after week. Let us drift back to the days when communication was a deeply physical, profoundly patient process. During the 1970s and 80s, many of our fathers, brothers, and uncles traveled to the Gulf countries, seeking difficult work to support their families. Our only connection to them was through the trusted local postal worker, the bostagi. We would eagerly listen for the familiar sound of his heavy, black iron bicycle squeaking down the street. When he called out our family name, our hearts would race with pure, uncontained joy. He would hand over a distinctive, incredibly thin blue airmail envelope, its edges printed with diagonal red and blue stripes. Holding that delicate paper in your hands was like holding a fragile piece of someone's heart. You knew that your loved one had actually touched this very paper, pressed a pen hard into its surface, and carefully folded it days or even weeks ago. We would gather around as the eldest in the family gently tore the envelope open, reading the beautifully handwritten Arabic words aloud. We would smell the paper, hoping to catch a faint, lingering scent of our absent father or brother. The act of writing a reply, choosing the perfect words to fit on the single page, was a beautiful exercise in deep, thoughtful love that instant text messages can never replace. And who was the true guardian of our beautiful childhood memories? It was the neighborhood doorman, the beloved Bawab. He was far more than just a man who watched the entrance of our residential building. He was a trusted uncle, a strict protector, and the ultimate keeper of our community secrets. His day began well before the sun even considered rising. You would hear the familiar, highly rhythmic sweeping sound of his long, dried palm frond broom scratching against the cool marble stairs of the building. Then, you would hear the loud splash of water as he generously washed the dusty pavement directly in front of the heavy wooden entrance doors, creating that incredibly distinct, earthy smell of wet asphalt that meant the morning had officially arrived. The Bawab sat on a simple, sturdy wooden bench right by the door, greeting every single person who entered or left by their first name. He knew who was sick, who was expecting a baby, and exactly which child had skipped their afternoon homework to play in the street. He would scold us if we misbehaved, and we listened to him with the exact same deep respect we had for our own parents. His watchful eyes gave our parents the ultimate peace of mind, knowing that the street was safe as long as he was sitting quietly on his wooden bench. Let us step back onto the balcony in the cool, breezy evenings of our youth to remember the absolute joy of playing carom. Before the era of dazzling video game consoles and glowing digital screens, this simple, square wooden board provided us with endless hours of fierce, passionate competition. The ritual always began with preparing the smooth wooden surface. We would sprinkle a generous amount of fine, white talcum powder all over the board, using our hands to spread it evenly so that the heavy wooden discs would slide with lightning speed. The sound of a carom game was incredibly distinctive. It was the sharp, aggressive flick of an index finger, followed by the loud, hard clack of wooden pieces violently crashing into one another and dropping perfectly into the corner string nets. We would sit on small wooden stools under the dim yellow glow of the single balcony light bulb, arguing passionately over exact rules and fiercely celebrating difficult trick shots. The smell of the fragrant talcum powder mixed beautifully with the cool night air. It was a game that required immense physical skill, patience, and strategy, bringing siblings and close friends tightly together in a shared bubble of intense focus and absolute joy, completely detached from the worries of the outside world. Now close your eyes again and try to hear the beautiful metallic symphony of the wandering koshery vendor. Before koshery became confined to massive, brightly lit chain restaurants, it was a glorious street food experience delivered right to our neighborhoods on a large, heavy glass and metal cart. You did not even need to look out the window to know he was coming. You could hear him from 3 streets away. He would use his large metal spoons to aggressively and rhythmically strike the edges of his metal serving bowls and the thick glass windows of his cart, creating a loud, ringing musical beat that echoed off the tall residential buildings. As he pushed his heavy cart closer, the most incredible, intoxicating aroma would fill the air. It was the heavy scent of dark, caramelized fried onions, the sharp, acidic tang of garlic vinegar, and the rich, warm smell of spicy tomato sauce simmering gently over a small, hidden flame. We would run down the stairs with our ceramic bowls from home, asking him to fill them to the brim. Watching his hands move was like watching a master conductor orchestrating a masterpiece, quickly layering the lentils, the macaroni, the rice, and the chickpeas with impossible speed. That cheap, incredible meal eaten standing on the street corner was the absolute taste of our shared, beautiful youth. Let us talk about the absolute freedom of our childhood afternoons, perfectly encapsulated in a pair of simple, white canvas shoes. We called them the cucci. When you first bought them, they were brilliantly white and smelled strongly of fresh rubber and stiff cotton. But within just a few short days of relentless street football, they would turn a dusty, permanent shade of gray. Our football pitches were not covered in soft green grass. They were the narrow, uneven dirt and asphalt alleyways between our apartment buildings. The goalposts were simply two heavy red bricks carefully placed on the ground, and the ball was often slightly deflated and covered in deep scuff marks. But to us, we were playing in the grandest stadiums in the entire world. We would play with intense, unbridled passion, sweating through our cotton shirts, completely ignoring the painful scrapes on our knees. The only thing that could possibly stop our fierce tournament was the powerful, melodic sound of the sunset call to prayer, the Maghrib Adhan, rolling over the city. That was the universal, undisputed signal that the day was over. We would grab our canvas shoes, pick up the heavy red bricks, and run back to our homes, exhausted, incredibly dirty, but filled with a pure, simple happiness that money could absolutely never buy. As we approach the end of our nostalgic journey, we must quietly remember the beautiful, deeply personal magic of the neighborhood mesaharati during the holy month of Ramadan. In the deep, silent hours of the night, long before the sky even began to lighten with the approaching dawn, the dark, empty streets would suddenly be filled with a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. It was the soft, steady beating of a small leather drum, accompanied by a strong, soulful voice echoing through the quiet alleyways. The mesaharati was a local man whose sacred duty was to wake the sleeping neighborhood for the final pre-dawn meal, the suhoor. But he did not just shout general prayers. He knew every single family in the area. He would walk slowly beneath our windows, looking up at the dark balconies, and he would chant the actual names of the children living inside. Hearing your own name called out in the middle of the night by this mysterious, wandering figure felt like absolute magic. It made you feel deeply seen, incredibly special, and profoundly connected to the spiritual fabric of your entire community. We would peek through the wooden shutters, trying to catch a glimpse of his lantern swinging in the dark, feeling the immense protective warmth of a neighborhood that truly cared for every single one of its souls. And finally, we arrive at our 20th memory, a simple, sweet reminder of the deep innocence we have left behind. Do you remember the sheer delight of unwrapping a small bar of Egyptian-made Corona chocolate? It was not imported, and it did not have fancy, expensive packaging. It was wrapped in modest silver foil with a simple paper sleeve bearing the beautiful, iconic drawing of a graceful gazelle. When you peeled back that delicate foil, the sweet, rich smell of cocoa and sugar would instantly fill your senses. The chocolate itself had a slightly firm, wonderfully grainy texture that melted slowly and perfectly on your tongue. We rarely got to eat a whole bar by ourselves. The true joy of this chocolate was in the absolute ritual of breaking it apart. You would carefully snap the thick, sweet squares along the molded lines, making sure they were exactly even, so you could proudly share them with your younger brother, sister, or your closest neighborhood friend sitting beside you on the dusty street curb. We did not have much back then, but we had the beautiful, profound willingness to share whatever small sweetness we possessed. That simple piece of shared chocolate represents the absolute essence of our youth. It was a time when true happiness was never about what you owned, but entirely about who you lovingly shared it with. As we open our eyes and return to the present day, it becomes beautifully clear that we do not simply miss these 20 old, forgotten objects. What our hearts truly ache for is the profound feeling of our lost youth. We deeply miss the slow, comforting rhythm of our days, the heavy, meaningful weight of true patience, and most importantly, the unbreakable physical connections we shared with one another in those golden 1970s and 80s. We miss a time when a simple piece of shared chocolate or a song on a wooden radio could make us feel incredibly wealthy in spirit. If this journey back in time brought a warm tear to your eye or a soft smile to your face, please do subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video so we can continue to preserve our beautiful shared history together. Now I have a very important question for you. Which of these beautiful memories deeply touched your heart the most today? Or perhaps, did you have a special, unique ritual in your own family home that we did not mention? Please, write your beautiful personal stories and cherished memories down in the comments below. I promise to read every single one, because your history is absolutely precious, and it deserves to be remembered forever.